Welcome to the remastering and reconstruction of Michael Todd Jr.'s Holiday in Spain. I'm David Strohmeyer. We're going to show you a few examples of the work we have done on this title, which was very problematic, as most restorations of 50-plus-year-old films would be, which were not stored in the best studio conditions. We call this not a restoration, but a remastering and reconstruction, as it came from different elements and not fully from the original camera negatives. Basically, we used the original negatives where we could, and then to get around some heavy damage and shrinkage, we had to resort to sourcing from two faded 70mm Eastman color prints for those problem areas. The 70mm prints were in slightly used condition and had some minor defects. The main problem, however, was the typical magenta fading situation. Since no soundtrack print master was located, we striped off the 6-channel sound from both prints so we could create a good, clean soundtrack for the final 5.1 mix. By the way, there was no separate or alternative negative for the longer Scent of Mystery version, or that title soundtrack, other than a few scenes we located in the vaults, which are included in this release as an extra. So first off, let's take a look at some of the camera negatives. Here is the original negative as we are ready for the telecine session at Crest Digital in Hollywood. Steve Koffler is our operator, and will do a best light transfer on each roll to digital files. So let's take a look at some raw scenes in roll 6 to see what we're up against. A dark scene is always handy to get a good idea about the condition. You can see that besides the overall flickering due to age, there is some strange perf fading, or shadow bleeding, that has entered the right side. Let's lighten up the image a little bit to see this better. Here is a daylight scene where you can see similar artifacts. Here it is in slow motion. Whether day or night scenes, you can see the basic problem. It reminds me of artifacts that you often see in early silent movies. Some of this could be from the aging of the film, or perhaps it came from substandard chemicals used in the original processing and is now showing itself. We also discovered a camera problem in the original negative, thus it also appears in the 70mm prints. This was often just limited to second unit photography and action scenes. Apparently the camera was threaded with too much of a loop in the upper chamber area before hitting the gate, and it caused this flaring or chattering-like effect. We also noted that the perfs were not damaged. Here's the same shot from the 70mm print. It is photographed in each frame. Using current image steadying software didn't help at all. Here's another daylight scene where those irritating, flickering, blotchy artifacts show themselves. You can see that the sky is really kind of a soup. Here's a closer look. At this point, I should bring up that we always do our work within a 16:9 high-def 2K frame. This is to use all the real estate of the high-def scan, so our digital files look like this with a slight squeeze, not letterboxed. The rest of our samples will look this way. Okay, let's look at some raw camera negative scans now from Reel 2. Here we find that the problem has vanished, or that those artifacts are barely visible. So this negative can easily be used in our remastering project. And here's what we were able to do with the color. I wish the entire film could have been done from negative like this. Okay, we're now back to the raw scan, but still reasonably clean, with only hints of neg dirt here and there, all easily fixed. Where the negatives were unusable, we had to resort to the two faded 70mm prints as source, selecting the best and cleanest versions of each scene to incorporate into the final show. Both prints had faded at an identical rate, so the color recovery process would be the same from either source. Here is an example from our raw scan of the 70mm faded print source. And on the right side is what color we could get from it after a few treatments. It's not perfect color, but it's a lot better than the alternative in the 65mm negative with all the flickering and warpage problems. Let's take a look at those three steps. The bottom left is our final. Then the first step is at the top, is simply the pink faded raw telecine scan. Then the intermediate stage, which is done partially in the telecine bay and partially in Final Cut Pro's color program. This intermediate stage gives us something to refine in the last stage. Often that last step happens on the DaVinci Resolve at a later date. Here is another example of print color recovery. One of the main drawbacks of going from print is getting good flesh tones, especially in scenes that were shot in lower light, or perhaps the negative was pushed a bit in the original processing. The faces can look a bit reddish on these shots. Faded print flesh tones can look a bit better when the original was well lit and exposed, such as in this shot. Here's the intermediate step, and then here's the cleaned and dusted final. So the overall film is a checkerboard of original camera negative and the best images selected from the faded 70mm prints with color recovery to get the complete remastered title. Here is another scene from the raw telecine of the original negatives, and you will see that the flesh tones have the potential to be much more natural and thus come alive with the final color correction. And here is what we ended up with. The last step is then to apply the smile box effect. Well, I hope this gives you a little better understanding of the several procedures used to remaster Holiday in Spain. This is David Strohmeyer. Thanks for watching.
Strange excitement in the air, her fragrant perfume lingers there. Why does the lady always wear the scent of mystery? The scent of mystery.